Good evening, everybody. Welcome in. For those who might be new, my name is Meshla. I am primarily an audiobook streamer. What that means is that I write and read my own Star Wars fan fiction and have been doing so for 25 years or so. Yeah, it's a long time. Hi, Halsey. Welcome in. For those who don't know, Halsey is the artist that I've been working with for my new stream visuals, logo, transitions, and all that fancy stuff. They're still in the works, but they are coming soon. So keep your eyes peeled on a stream. They might pop in when you're not looking. I'm really glad that she was able to wander by. I know that she's been trying to for a while, so I'm very glad that she was able to. And we're gonna be reading tonight. So yeah. So I would suggest prostate. Oh dear. Frosty is in rare form as always. I can't really help that. Kind of styled after a pretty old war veteran with a little bit of cheek, poking a little bit of fun at me and kind of everybody. Hope you guys are cool with that. Anyway, so we will be reading tonight, and I apologize if I keep looking off to the left. I am attempting to fix my camera. Being kind of weird. Trying to get my camera sorted. Apologies. Maybe that will help. Yeah, I did a little bit of rearranging on where some things were with my monitors and my general setup, so camera got a little jostled. So if you guys see me looking off to the left now, I guess it would be your right. That's where my chat is. So let me know if the music is too loud and you cannot hear me. I'd much rather you hear me than the music right now. I may actually turn that down just a smidge. Just, yeah. Oh, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure because I have been told that sometimes the music is too loud. So it's a balancing act for me trying to find the right levels. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Kind of incongruous with what we're going to be reading tonight, but we're going to proceed anyway. Again, thank you for each and every one of you who is here this evening. I greatly appreciate you. I know I generally don't try to bring, outside stream stuff into stream, but I'm really grateful for each and every one of you who's here this evening. Been having a rough few days, and really grateful to see all of you. All right, I'm gonna take a drink of water, and then we're gonna get into this. I mean business. Let's go. All right. Like I might need a prompter if I'm gonna keep reading. Oh man. Alrighty. Chapter 22. Coruscant. There can't be anything left, one of them said as they combed over the remains. We've loaded enough beradium on that old thing to incinerate both of them. We keep looking, the team leader said as he looked at one of the other squad members. Picking up anything? Just the Esamari we had on board. the one with the scanner said as he swept it over the debris. I'm not picking up any traces of human remains. The old stories say they fade away when they die, another one said as he looked over another section of the crash. We should still be able to find some kind of trace, the one with the scanner said. And I'm not seeing anything here that tells me that they were actually in it. Then we keep looking, the team leader said again as he walked over the scene. We don't report until we find their remains, or find them and finish the job. There's no signs here, the one with the scanner said as he pulled up the explosion again. Look at this, though. 2 objects falling towards the ground. He pointed to indicate the hotel close to them. It could have been them. There's no other indication that their remains are in this wreck. Let's check it out. Quietly and discreetly, they returned to their speeder and crossed over to the hotel service entrance. The lead of the team looked over the hotel map while the others kept an eye out. There's a garden up top, he told the others as he located the nearest lift that would take them there. It might give us some cover while we find out about that image you saw. Come on. There was no waiting on the lift and no others to see them get on. Once they reached the rooftop, they quickly spread out and went through the garden slowly. Got him, one said as he motioned the others over. It looks like they made it somehow. More fun for... the other started to say, and then it went suddenly quiet. What? The leader asked as he turned from looking at Ari and Mick in time to see the incoming kick that connected with his jaw. It broke on contact as he fell back towards the roof. Ari had just woken with her danger sense flaring in time to see the group appear, and she was on the verge of summoning what power she could to cover her and Mick when she saw the first person go down and the next fall back from the kick. A moment later, she saw Renius ducking the third, who was swinging his carbine like a club and delivering his palm right to the man's chin, disarming him. He then grabbed him by the arm and threw him against the wall, where he landed with a thud. Fourth was starting to come around. Behind you! Ari yelled at the same time that the young man whirled. Renius sensed the attack coming and saw this as he threw the third man towards him. He wasted no time as his right hand went under his jacket. Fourth man thought he had it under control as he ran forward, ready to shoot the young man at point-blank range. Confidence turned suddenly to agony and pain an instant later as he saw the flash of a light erupt near his hand. Renius has brought his lightsaber into play before he could even pull the trigger, and the blade was alive mid-swing, slicing through the blaster pistol, and it even took a few of his assailant's fingers. The man went down on his knees, holding what was left of his hand, when Renius's foot connected with his jaw. The young man's lightsaber was soon back in its concealed spot with a smooth motion as he looked around the scene and began checking the bodies. All of them were unconscious, which was what he had intended. Even though they came with intent to kill, it didn't mean he had to. His attack had come so swiftly that they would probably wake up and not realize what had happened. But he didn't want to take them, so he went to each of them and tapped into the Force to wipe the sudden event from their minds. The only difficulty would be the one he was forced to draw his lightsaber against. Because of the weapon's ability to cauterize wounds, there would not be much hope of restoring the man's hand to what it was. He shook his head and closed the distance to Ari and Mick as he finished his work. Are you two all right? He asked. We will be once we get to a place where he can heal up, Ari said as she returned to checking over Mick. He took the brunt of it. It's a good thing you arrived when you did. I don't know how that could have played out. You've definitely improved. A lot of practice and practical experience since missed, Renius told her as he looked to see about getting Mick to his feet. We've got to get off this roof in someplace quiet. Thanks for the lurk, Kurt. I appreciate you. Oh my goodness, what just happened? Oh. That scared me a little bit. That is also my raid alert, so it confused me for a second. Oh my goodness. Thanks for the redeem. I appreciate you. Yeah, it scared me momentarily because that's something I added like Monday, so I was not expecting anybody to play with that, but it's there to be played with. All right. Trying to make sure that I drink all the water because I'm reading. All right. This fixing my chair a little bit. There we go. Now I'm sitting correctly. Catan. Stefan was busy with preparations of his own. All the meetings and planning were taken care of, and he was dressing in different attire. Even if he wasn't well known in the Remnant, the robes of a Jedi would be a dead giveaway. So he decided to wear the clothes of a local trader. They were nondescript and would allow him to blend in while having the advantage of keeping any tools and equipment on his person, including his lightsaber. Jared and the others coming with him were similarly dressed, and it wouldn't be too long before their transport would arrive. Stefan, Jade said as she entered their room. She scrunched her nose as she observed his attire. She was always used to seeing him in his robes, or a variation thereof. This seemed different. They're here. Good. They're early, Stefan said with a smile as he adjusted his tunic and walked with her down the hall. The two she had mentioned were waiting in the living room and immediately stood up as he started to descend the stairs. Hal, he said in greeting, taking the man's hand first and then proceeding to greet the second. Amber, it's good to see you two. I wish it were for a more social reason. I can agree with that, Hal Garrett said as he patted the butt of the old Kimbeck blaster on his thigh. My grandfather would want to come back and take his old blaster to do some hunting if he knew how Intelligence has been doing lately. One of his biggest pet peeves was the REMFs not keeping the faith. I'm not sure what that abbreviation is. I don't remember. Stefan nodded softly in agreement. Hal and Amber Garrett were a brother and sister team, part of New Republic Intelligence that were always known in certain circles as a group that did what it took and got it done. For them, it was also a family tradition to do their part since their grandparents had taken up the mantle from smuggling. Dalton and Crystal Garrett. Believe me, when you sent us the info on them using one of our recon suits against Catan, I almost didn't want to believe it, Amber said as they sat back down. But after I checked, I couldn't believe that someone actually authorized it. And I couldn't figure out who it was. And my clearance is pretty damned high. So we're more than willing to help out if we're being betrayed, Hal continued. But I have to tell you, Master Card, if folks high up in Intelligence are in on this with Maxwell, and if it's him leading this betrayal, our ship could be compromised the moment we enter Imperial space. We won't have to use it, Stefan told them. Your grandfather's ship is in the hangar right now. That caught both of them by surprise. But how? Amber asked. Dad sold it years ago. I know, the Jedi told them. He then filled them in on the details of Jairus' death. His daughter has had it in safekeeping here while training both with another Mandalorian and as my daughter's Padawan. It should be relatively unknown to the Imperials and your people as well. Then we have a ride, Al said with a firm nod. It's been a while since I've looked her over. Do you mind if I do the pre-flights? Of course. I wouldn't want it otherwise. Coruscant. Where are we? Ari asked as she helped Rhaenys get Mick settled. He had been quiet about where they were heading since they'd left the Grand, mainly because he focused on keeping others' attention away from them. They had been carrying Mick since he was still injured. A few mutual friends set this up for us while I was on the way here from Catan, the young man finally told her as they finished with Mick so he could rest. I'd say more than friends, actually. You could say that, another voice came from the doorway as the person who spoke closed it behind him. It wasn't easy, though, on such short notice. But the general is worth taking the risk. Ari turned around, knowing that voice as she would have any others close to her. Beer Tree from Phoenix Squadron was carrying a few bags of foodstuffs and supplies. Hart Baka, also from the squadron, was with him, bringing in a few more sealed cases. Tree! Ari said in utter surprise at seeing her former pilots. Baka, what in the name of the Force are you doing here? Phoenix Squadron? Is on temporary leave per Brink's orders. Boyer told her as he sat down. We were attached to the fleet at Ord Canifrey, and he had something to say to the fleet commander about how the Katani battle group was being left high and dry. As a result, the entire squadron is on leave here under his order, after he decked the fleet commander. Ari just shook her head. That sure sounds like him. But what are you doing here? Like young Card said, Baka answered as he set down his supplies as well. We're here to help. We've got provisions and some gear that might help us out. So, what's first? And that is the end of chapter 22. Oh, goodness. I have the hiccups for some reason. I'm gonna drink more water. Also, this is by no means a sponsored advertisement, but pretzels.com has some pretty amazing gluten-free pretzels. So, just saying, if you really like pretzels and you like different flavors, check them out. Totally not sponsored, I promise. I have their gluten-free version of the oh my goodness, I can't remember. Garlic parm. I had to look at it. They're really good. The flavors are really solid. So if you're feeling snacky and would like some really good pretzels, they have a lot to offer. That is my non-sponsored PSA on snacks. I've been looking for some different options, and I found these, and they have at least 4 or 5 versions that are gluten-free of different flavors. So, I have some variety to choose from. Alright. Chapter 23. Bastine 4. Day 5. Ethan sat on a fallen log and momentarily removed his helmet to take a drink from his canteen. They'd been skirting around the area for a few hours now, narrowing down towards a spot where Callista could feel the emptiness and force. He sipped slowly, looking over the next hillside. No sign of buildings, he said. There's a good chance they built their stuff underground for concealment. Callista nodded, squatting down and pulling her canteen free to take a sip. Most likely. Or most of it, at least. If I'm right, that bubble should be close to some water. She closed her eyes. It's not as forested. Right where I stopped feeling things looks like a beach or a clearing. And not much place for anyone looking for them to be able to conceal themselves, Ethan said as he pulled out a set of macro binoculars. They had enough brains to do that much. He changed the setting on the macros and started looking over the area more. Partially concealed emplacements at different points. Looks like E-webs, too. Serious firepower. She frowned and took the macros from him. I'm a bit worried, though. If that force user of his is inside that bubble, it means they can't sense me. She sighed. It's going to be tricky. Maybe Marin had a chance. Ethan looked at his chrono for a moment. If they can't sense you coming, then maybe you'll have an even footing. You might even have an edge. Whoever it is that he's got, the fella probably hasn't seen as much combat as you have. If she's remembered everything we've taught her, and they haven't done a lot of harm or have her in some kind of weird restraint, she should have at least been able to get loose by now. Again, Callista closed her eyes. From what I know of Duran, he wouldn't just leave her alone. He likes to assert his position. Dan and I saw it in his takeover of Kertzad. Her face tightened. We should be prepared for her to be a bit worse for wear. That way we can handle it better if that's the case. She stowed her canteen and rose to her feet. Ethan kept scanning the area with the macros when movement caught his attention. It was slight, but there was air coming from a spot several meters away from the emplacements. It was still in a wooded area. Hey, check this out, he said, handing her the macros and pointing to the spot. She frowned, taking the macros, and as she focused in, she breathed a quiet swear. What the criff? Does that look like an air vent to you? He asked with a grin. Look. She zoomed closer and then looked to either side of it. It doesn't look like it's got E-webs that could put it in a crossfire, either. Floppy, Duran. Or did he do that on purpose? Or the place may have been here longer than Duran's occupied it. They wouldn't have been able to build something like that without attracting a lot of attention from the locals, which might be our ticket in. We'll have to check. She nodded. Look, let's go. She felt a tingle at the base of her skull and carefully checked the charge on her rippers. We may have some Mandawade backup, said softly. I heard from Sharon. Do you have any luck? Ethan asked as he replaced his helmet and checked his weapons. Callista nodded. She was able to get a few, yes. Mandalore couldn't spare many, but any help is good. They should be... She trailed off, noting movement in the tree line. Ah, there they are. Nice timing, Ethan said with a grin as they moved to meet up. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 55 seconds. She smirked behind her visor and moved out in front of Ethan to greet the one in the lead. A woman. Her hand rested on the butt of her ripper for a moment as they exchanged a coded greeting and then gripped forearms. As they did, she turned back to Ethan, gesturing to the small but thin and muscled woman behind her. Ethan, this is Meshla Morot. She leads the Kara clan, who are mostly combat engineers and close combat specialists. The other woman nodded to him and gripped his arm briefly. Sequoia, Mandalore told me you needed assistance. There's a Stalkad? Inside, Ethan said as he moved his head towards the bunker. An unknown number of Kertzad and probably a force user among them. E-webs cover the open areas, but a vent shaft several meters inside the tree line isn't covered. Could be our way in. Meshla nodded, lifting a hand to her ear for a moment, and they could hear the muted conversation. I and my Vode can cover you. I'll follow you in while they create a perimeter once we reach that vent. We need to get everyone back out and then blow those Kertzad to Daryam. Then what are we standing around here for? Ethan said as he led back. Meshla and Callista shared a look and a chuckle. He's always been like that, Callista told the other woman in low tones. I figured he was, she replied with a nod. I can't say I know him personally, but I know his reputation. He gets things done, that's for sure. Callista nodded. That he does. She fell silent as they made their way single file through the undergrowth and towards the bunker. It took a while, being careful to keep cover, but they made it to the vent together, and Ethan started to check the area using his macros. No BB traps, no sensors or tripwires. I don't like this. It's almost too easy. Callista frowned. I can't feel either, so I'm blind too. Meshla shook her head. Either way, we're blind. She gestured to one of the other Mandos as they crouched in the brush outside the vent. The other one, Pendosi, if Callista read the lettering on his helmet correctly, reached into a pouch at his belt and withdrew something small. I can try to use this remote to get some visuals. I'm not sure how long it's good for, but better than nothing. He drew a datapad from another pouch and entered commands as a small probe hovered. Any sensors on that vent? Nothing I can see or pick up, Ethan said as he moved out of the way so the young man could work. As he did so, he double-checked his carbine and the extra power packs on his vest. Pendosi nodded. Jate. He typed a few more things and the small remote slipped towards the vent. He kept it up against the ceiling. The dark color of its casing helped it blend in. Slowly, images started to come through the feed, and he angled the pad so the others could see it. The camera view showed cramped corridors, and one or two figures dressed in Kurtzad colors were periodically seen. As the drone moved farther, heavy doors came into view. One, in particular, looked like it had been fitted with a sensor, and two armed Kurtzad stood to either side of it. That's probably where she's at, Ethan said quietly as he reviewed the path. No one near the other side of this vent? Pendosi tapped a few times on the controls, looking back at previous footage as the feed continued. Two at the junction here. He pointed to the bend in the corridor. Quiet work, then, Ethan said as he slung his carbine and climbed into the vent. The young man nodded, momentarily bending close to confer with Meshla. Ethan, I can put this on a direct feed to your HUD and send the drone ahead of you. He began tapping commands into the data pad and bringing the drone back to hover at the junction, the two sentries just visible. Give me 5 minutes, Ethan said as he descended the vent shaft. Pendosi nodded and set the drone to move a few meters ahead of Ethan, giving him a view of what was ahead. As Ethan moved to the vent, Callista followed, swinging easily into the small space. Wait here, he told her as he glanced down the corridor slightly and drew a blade from its spot on his left thigh. A minute later, the first was down, and by the time the second heard the scuffle, Ethan had jammed his knife up through his jaw and into his helmet. He let the man down carefully so as not to make noise before he withdrew and cleaned the blade. All clear, he whispered into his comm. I'm going to pause there because we have an ad starting. I will be right back. Take a break, guys. See you in a minute and a half. Okay, Frosty Tools is on fire tonight. I apologize if that was a little too much. Alright. I hope everybody took an opportunity to get a stretch, have a drink, or grab a snack. Really important to do when you're having a long reading session, or gaming, or whatever it is you guys do in your free time. I do a lot of things in my free time. Hope you're back. Make sure that I can, like, see what I'm reading over here. Right. There we go. Alyssa nodded, hanging back as she waited for a few moments. When she heard the whispered calm, she moved forward, drawing a knife of her own. It was better to keep this as quiet as possible. She lifted a hand to her visor momentarily, shaking her head. Being without the force made her feel slightly dizzy. "You all right?" Ethan asked as she climbed into the corridor behind him. "I should be," he replied softly. Jabal Yasamiri playing havoc. I feel blind. She turned slightly to orient herself to what she'd seen on the feed. Marin's cell is down that way. She pointed to the east corridor. "If that thing is close by, we'll leave a package with it," he promised. "Can't kill it immediately. That would alert the man that they have. We have to delay it some." She nodded. "Let's go get Marin. I have a feeling she's not too happy." They proceeded quietly down the corridor, alert to anyone they might encounter, until they reached the cell. Ethan looked at the lock quickly before he took a small, pen-sized object and held it close to the bolt. A moment later, there was a muffled sound as a blast came out of the object and tore through the deadbolt. Then he worked the door loose. They heard a soft scuffling on the other side. Marin peeked around the corner, a chair clutched in her hands, even as her left arm drooped a little. Her face was pale, save for a nasty-looking bruise and dried blood that had crusted on her lower lip and chin. Her face contorted with pain as she tried to bite back a curse. Ethan heard it and just peeked around the door. "You want to lower that club before you hit the wrong person?" Marin swallowed, and her hand shook severely as she tried to set the chair down without actually dropping it. "Sita," she whispered, looking away. It was somewhat out of character for her, and Callista shared a pointed glance with Ethan as she noticed. She'd also caught how Marin continuously worked the fingers of her left hand. Her gun hand. Ethan noticed it too, and held out his hand to take hers before looking at it carefully. "What did he do?" Marin flinched and tried to pull away, shaking her head as she bit her lip. "Needles. In the nerves. Hurt like Osik, or numbed. I don't know when or if I'll get feeling back." Ethan gritted his teeth and looked around. "Where's that Yosemite?" She frowned and then pointed upwards. "At least I think that's where. I didn't get much chance to—" She broke off again and looked away, her right hand fussing with her hair momentarily. "Get her out of here," Ethan told Callista as he looked up with the night vision on his helmet. He could see the animal perched just high enough to block off the room. He reached into the pouch on his hip, withdrew a thermal detonator, and tossed it onto the nutrient frame above. Alyssa nodded, mindful of taking Marin's right hand as she led her out of the room, free hand on her ripper. "Corridor's clear. I don't like this." "I don't either," Ethan said as he finished with the detonator and pulled his carbine free. "Like I said, too easy." At that moment, the thunking of footsteps was heard, and Fort Kirtzad rounded the corner. Callista swore, bringing her ripper up as she moved Marin behind her. "Ref, we forgot to kill the cams." "I didn't see any cameras," Ethan grunted as he burst out of the room in front of the Kirtzad. The surprise was momentary, but enough for Ethan to take all four down with a few bursts of his carbine. "Come on, let's go." Callista nodded and wrapped an arm around Marin's shoulders, pulling the girl with her gently as she swept the hallway with her ripper, checking for more attackers. She took down two more before they got to the vent. Still too easy. "We're coming out hot," Ethan warned the others outside. They've started rushing. Better get set for an ambush. Roger that. Meshla's voice came back over the channel. She started issuing orders for the others to spread out even as she moved. We're all set here. Let me know when you're clear. Callista should be reaching the vent now, Ethan said as he gunned down several more Kurtzad and backed down the corridor, remembering the blast radius of the bomb he'd left behind. Once he got to the vent, he could set it off. There I am. He was far enough now, and they were already alerted. He tapped his wristcom, and soon a loud explosion came from the direction of the cell, with smoke starting to fill the corridors beyond. Meshla watched the two clear the vent, followed closely by Ethan. She grinned as she saw a rolling fireball appear where the cell had been, followed by her own as she blew the vent behind him. Wait for a party or choose our own ground? Ethan asked, already knowing the answer as he slapped a fresh power pack into his carbine. Meshla smirked. Let's teach them how to dance. Our way. With that, she drew her rippers, nodding to Callista. Get Marin clear. She then looked to Ethan for confirmation. I blew that Yosemite to hell for you, Ethan said. Should feel at least a little better now. Callista grinned and caught the corner of Marin's mouth turning up. Thanks. It does. She rubbed her forehead for a moment. Got a dozen or two more coming our way. Only that many? Ethan asked as he started to lead the way back into the forest. Hardly seems fair. To them. She shook her head, frowning. 16 more coming around in a pincer attempt. She continued, pointing to the tree line to their west. Then she dug out her spare ripper and shoved it into Marin's right hand. Ethan, did you happen to see her equipment belt? He pulled it off his shoulder where he'd slung it and tossed it in a direction as he checked over the rest of his own gear. Hey, Coffee Crystals, it's good to see you. I hope you're having a good evening. Callista caught it in her free hand, going to a knee to help Marin buckle it on as she noticed her fumbling. Marin looked at it, taking a mental inventory. Sovereign's saber was missing. She looked up sharply. Ethan? What? He thought about it for a second and then looked towards the group that was approaching. One had a blue-bladed lightsaber. That son of a Sith. Ladies, that's gonna have to be your fight. And that's chapter 22. We're actually doing really well. We might get to chapter 25 tonight. 24 is a bit longer. We'll see where we are by 8 o'clock. Alright. I wasn't sure how far we'd get. I know. I thought some of these chapters were longer than they are, so I estimated 3 chapters. We might actually get to 4. We'll find out. I'm gonna get some more water here. Yes, more is always good. Especially when it comes to water and reading. Alright. Chapter 24. Mirkir. He's a classic kind of character. Nick shrugged. Gotta have a hidden fortress on a planet nobody has any business being on, and surrounded by hundreds of kilometers of terrain that only wants to murder you. It is so eloquently put. Vincent had his eyes on the instrument panel. Of course, the way you describe him, he sounds like a villain from a children's holodrama. The local fauna does make it difficult to pilot, though. He's got the goatee for it, Nick smirked as he gazed out the forward viewport. We don't need the instruments, Vince. Head for the biggest tree on the horizon. He pointed out the forward viewport towards a massive tree jutting out high above the rest on the eastern horizon. Its leaves shone in the light like a green-tinted mirror. The metal content of the plants on Mirkir and the unusual fauna that occupied the planet made for a world nobody was interested in. The metal content wreaked havoc on a ship's navigational instruments. The predators on the planet could and had killed entire scouting parties. The forest's cutest animal could completely negate the force in a 3-meter bubble around itself. It was perfect as a base of operations for a man who didn't want to be found. Very few people knew about the place. Fewer still knew that Card had kept it up. Only 1 or 2 people alive in the galaxy knew the old man was sentimental. Nikyar Randar hoped against hope that Card's sudden disappearance from the game meant he wanted a break, and not that he'd gone ill as rumor had it. The man had taken breaks before, and had always without warning. How else would the most sought-after information king in the universe get any kind of space or time to himself? Still, Nick thought, even if I'm right, he's not going to be happy we're dropping in on his time off. He probably won't shoot us, Vince said, catching the feeling behind Nick's thoughts. Guess we'll find out soon enough, Nick said, as he nodded towards the forward viewport. Let's put her down there, just outside the compound. We'll knock. Card likes polite. Etiquette aside, Vince said, running through the power-down sequence. I hope he likes us enough to not put a price on our heads. Even if he refuses to help, I'd consider that a win. You're such a downer lately, Nick moaned as he moved towards the boarding ramp. The impending doom of the universe must have that effect on me, Vince deadpanned. They walked to the compound's still doors and knocked. Nick gazed up at the nondescript dot on the wall above the doors and waved, smiling. A minute passed, and nothing happened. Then, almost reluctantly, the great doors creaked and began to roll apart. Horizont. He needs a back-to-tank, Ari sighed, looking over the damage to her husband's back and arms. He lay on his stomach with back-to-bandages over the entirety of his back, sleeping, for now. His breathing was still labored, but he soldiered on. Unfortunately, there was only so much she could do through the force. She'd stopped the burns from going any deeper and had repaired what she could, but he needed new skin to grow. Creating something from nothing was still out of her reach as far as the force was concerned. He needs a back-to-tank and a skin graft. I need a drink and all the intel we have on those 4 goons who tried to jump us on the roof. Renius? Thank you, Coffee Crystals. I appreciate you. Yeah, filling in for Wraith while he's not here. Thank you, ma'am. Oh. Alright. And a stretch. Yes, much needed. Ari turned from where Micron lay and sat gently on the edge of the bed. Renius looked up from his post at the door. I stripped what I could from them before we left, the young man said. No identification, a few Republic credits, blasters of common make, nothing to identify them as part of any larger. From that, I can guess that they were professionals. Who were they, or who were they working for? I don't know. We don't have the equipment to scan their weapons here. It makes me wish we'd had time to bring one back. Ari blew a loose strand of hair away from her face. But their backup was probably there the moment we left. I doubt we'd find any trace of them in that rooftop garden now. I'm sorry, Master Ari, Renius began. No, Renius. Ari shook her head. You did splendidly under the circumstances. I don't think anyone could have done a better rescue job. I'm just itching for someone in my crosshairs. So what do we do now? Weir asked. I need to stay here with Mick, said, but we need to get him to the temple. It wouldn't have been infiltrated, and the medical ward will still have supplies we need to get him back to fighting Trim. That's where you all come in. I want you to steal a medevac transport and some uniforms. Also, pick up some hair dye. Mick and I are too well known to risk being spotted. Any particular colors you're looking for, boss? Weir smiled. Neon green? Flaming pink? I can hurt you, Weir. Ari gave him a smoldering glare, but softened it with a wink. I always wanted to try being a redhead. Get blonde for the fallen warrior here. Renee's laughed. Oh, Master Din will love that. Serves him right, Ari smirked, taking the whole of that blast by himself. Her tone was disapproving, but her eyes gave her away as she looked lovingly at her husband. She knew he could feel her love and gratitude, even in an uneasy sleep. Besides, he's cute as hell when he pouts. Whatever you say, boss. Veer saluted. One medevac transport and enough uniforms to outfit us all? We'll be back in 5 hours. Good luck out there. Ari nodded. May the force be with you. With us all. Roger that. Veer turned somber. Mercure. I ought to have you shot. I've not often been one to say it, Vincent arched an eyebrow at Nick. Yeah, the pirate waved the mercenary off. You told me so. But I doubt it would do any good, Talon'Karrde continued. He sat behind a large hardwood desk at the base of a giant tree. The tree grew up into the center of the room, and its branches wove their way to the ceiling. Yslamiri lazed about its boughs. He'd entertained Luke Skywalker and Grand Admiral Thrawn in this room, orchestrating the takeover of his predecessor's vast information empire from behind the desk where he now sat. This was more than a room. It was his history, written in permacrete and durasteel. Even without the Force, you'd find some way to survive and pester me until I finally decided to leave this galaxy in a more permanent fashion. Kind of resilient, Nikiar smiled. Aren't we? Yes, Talon mused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. You share that and other attributes with a certain persistent insect. Be that as it may, Vincent quickly cut in before Nick could retort. Telling you why we're here is probably redundant, no? Clever lads you are. Hard motioned to the 2 chairs in front of his desk. Sit. If I had wished you harm, you would have been harmed by now. Warily, the 2 rogues sat down. Karrde flashed a large smile. Now, he said, tapping a few hidden keys on his desk. A holo projector rose from a recessed portion of the desktop. The projected image looked like it had been taken from a spaceport security camera. The still showed a busy hallway, various denizens of the galaxy shuffling through with optics forward in an air of hurried nervousness. This was lifted from a camera in Imperial City spaceport on Bastion, hence the obvious nervousness of the travelers. The imps have been tightening security procedures for some time. Travel within Imperial space requires civilians to carry 3 forms of ID and nothing that would beak or conceal a weapon. They're even taking nail clippers from their passengers now. Oh my nail clippers. Oh my goodness. What do their travel posters read like? Nick interjected. Travel the Empire, a free frisking at every turn. More to the point, Vincent leaned forward. What does this have to do with us? I'll let the footage speak for itself. Karrde hit another hidden key and the recording began to play. The masses continued to shuffle through, harried and haggard. For a minute, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, 3 men entered the hallway dressed like everyone else, but their gait betrayed them. Despite what was clearly an expression of nervousness on their faces, their walk was that of professional soldiers. Their steps were even and strong. One man walked at point in front of a hover sled carrying what looked like a coffin. The other 2 had positions behind the sled, their eyes alert. Karrde tapped another few keys and the image froze, focusing on the hover sled. Nick and Vince inhaled sharply. The coffin-shaped object was supposed to look like just any other nondescript box, but one could make out the instrument panel upon closer inspection. It was a stasis pod, and on the belt of one of the 2 now obvious sentries hung the unmistakable cylinder of a lightsaber. They've got your missing Jedi Master in there, Karrde said, voicing the obvious. We've tracked the transport they boarded to a secure facility on the other side of the planet. We've got the coordinates but haven't received information on the facility itself. That should tell you something. It tells us this job just got really interesting, Nick whistled. It tells you that facility is impossible to breach, Card said as the image disappeared and the hollow projector sank back into the desk. It tells you that nobody has the layout, that nobody knows how to get in or out, that the facility doesn't exist. Right, Nick said. Interesting. Will you give us the coordinates? Vincent asked. We've taken impossible jobs in the past. Not like this you haven't, Talon warned. This is something else entirely. You try this and you will die. Of that, I'm certain. Understood, sir, Nikyar said, losing his trademark sarcasm. May we have that intel? Talon Card looked them over, his gaze searching their faces, his eyes penetrating. They returned his gaze, and he saw their resolve. This was something more than just a job. This was a mission, something bigger than both of them, and they would follow through with or without help. He chuckled, and then took a data disk from his front pocket. On this disk is everything I have. You take this, and you use it. You find a way. You get help, because you will need it. Vincent accepted the disk and pocketed it. What do we owe you, Card? A galaxy, the Information King said. You owe me a galaxy that isn't on the verge of chaos and destruction. Now, do we contact Stefan? Vincent asked as they piloted the Phantom away from Mercure. Yes, Nikyar said. He had yet to regain his joviality. The severity of the moment had not yet passed. Now, we contact Stefan. Last I heard, he was on his way to Imperial space anyway. With luck, we'll be able to tag along. With luck, we'll be able to contact him, Vincent corrected as he plugged an encryption code into the comm station. This code is an older one. I'm not certain he'll still be using it. We try anyway, Nick said, turning to look out the forward viewport. If that fails, we track him down the hard way. Interesting was an understatement, Vince said, before turning to the comm. Transport Phantom hailing Stefan Card on secure frequency. Stefan, do you copy? Over. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 48 seconds. Vestine 4, Day 5, outside the Kiritsad base. Callista nodded to Ethan, motioning Marin to stay close as she circled the perimeter of the clearing. The approaching Kiritsad slowed and began to fan out into the trees, weapons drawn. As Callista pulled her presence even tighter, Marin described briefly using hand gestures how she was going to attempt to draw off their man, Laurel. It would be similar to what she'd done to Ethan back on Catan, but would she be able to hold the illusion in her current state? The Kiritsad slowly closed the gap, their weapons leading. It took a moment for Callista to locate Laurel, but then she saw him. Brilliant blue blade of Sovereign's saber blazed in his grip. Her fingers tightened around her own hilt as she crept forward. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Marin crouching a few meters away behind a tree. Marin's back pressed to the rough bark of the tree as she clutched Callista's river in her right hand. She wasn't as good a shot with her right hand, but it would have to do. Breathing out, she pushed a thread of her awareness outwards, searching for Laurel and the Force. She found him moving slowly in their general direction a few moments later. She also had her presence closed off in the Force. Taking a deep breath, she formed an image of herself in her mind. She then reached out, placing the image behind a tree about 20 meters away from her position, but well within Laurel's line of sight. Slowly, she made it move away from the tree, crawling through the brush, and made certain that Laurel saw it. Ethan found good cover and looked down the sight of his carbine at the first man he targeted. He kept tracking him as he looked over the rest. Give them a few more meters, he whispered over the comm. Then we nail the coffin shut. Copy that, came Meshla's voice. She was about a dozen meters off to his left. Her voice fell muted momentarily as she directed her people to fan out. Callista and Marin remained crouched where they were. Marin could feel beads of sweat coursing down her neck as she slowly moved the image so it would pass between her and Callista, hoping Laurel would follow. Gradually, the carrot saw drew closer until Meshla could hear the twigs snapping underfoot. She lifted a closed fist, her gaze sliding to Ethan for the final call as she sighted down the barrel of her verpine. Ethan put the dot of his laser sight just above the curve of the armor plating, his target, and fired a single full-power shot to take him down. He didn't have to see if the shot hit home. He knew it had. He then continued to the next in line. Meshla followed suit and heard other shots around her as others did the same. 6 Kirtsad fell before they could even begin to scan for the shooters. The others spread out, ducking behind trees as they tried to pinpoint their assailants. Laurel stopped forward, 2 armored Kirtsad commandos by his side. He held Sovereign's saber in his grip, the pale blue blade blazing as he used it to bat aside blaster bolts rather sloppily. His eyes narrowed as he spotted the movement of the Marin apparition. He turned to follow it, waving the others back as he closed the distance. Marin frowned, moving the apparition between the trees and slowly towards her position as she and her apparition drew a bead on him and fired. Ethan moved slowly through the ground cover, moving his carbine on its single-point sling to his left side while his other hand drew the ripper at his thigh. He aimed, taking out the first Kirtsad he saw. Another came after him, and the man quickly received a blaster bolt at close range to the throat. Ethan kept scanning to see if Duran was among them. Meshla and the others continued to provide cover fire for Callista and Marin as they slowly drew Laurel towards them. Callista's fingers flexed around her own lightsaber, and she grinned in satisfaction as Marin's shot connected, driving Laurel to a knee. She moved, then, leaping from her hiding place as her violet blade swept down towards him, with Shoto guarding her center. Laurel blinked in surprise, bringing his stolen blade around, but he was a hair too slow. Callista's strike knocked his blade wide, and she followed up with a swift kick to the jaw, causing him to stumble away. And I think we're about to start with an ad, so I will be back. Alright. And we're back from our ad. Thanks so much for hanging out during that. I appreciate you. Oh, sorry. With the Yosemite gone, Callista had fallen into the river of the forest, letting it wash over her and bring the forest into sharp clarity. Ethan looked along the line and saw one already running in a different direction. The fight was as good as done, and this one knew it. Instinct told him that it had to be Gerard. He began to run up to him, still under cover. He was gaining ground and a little elevation as he finally closed the distance and jumped into the open. He had the reach, and he horse-collared him with his armor and threw him to the ground. Duran's helmet came off when he hit, and he slowly started to rise, reaching for a blaster, but Ethan was faster, kicking it out of his hand. "You think you're going to get out of this easy?" Ethan asked as he took his helmet off and tossed it aside, his free hand going for a vibroblade. "You and I have unfinished business to settle, and you aren't slipping away this time." Duran snarled, a wicked-looking knife already in his hand. "Would that have anything to do with a certain young charge of yours?" he asked, a dark grin spreading over his face as he lunged forward. The lunge took Ethan, and he let himself fall backward, driving the butt of his knife into Duran's backplate. When Ethan's back hit the ground, he pushed up with his knees and flipped Duran over. He rose, blocking Duran's lunge by gripping his wrist and twisting his arm. He wanted to drive his own home, but Duran's free hand came up and did the same to his wrist and arm. Ethan responded by headbutting the man away from him. Across the clearing, Callista and Laurel fought, her purple blade swinging quickly as she blocked and lunged. She could hear Mick's voice in her mind, helping her keep focused, even as she began to let go, to feel Laurel moving. Everything slowed to a crawl, and she acted. Her shoto slashed across the gap between them, sinking into Laurel's chest up to the hilt. Coughed in surprise, slowly collapsing to his knees as Sovereign's blade fell from his fingers. Callista stared down at him, her dark visor filling his vision as she hauled him up by the collar and drove the blade in deeper. "This is my justice, for what you have done to one of mine and everyone Kirtsat has killed." With that, she closed down her blade, his body collapsing to the ground as the blade supporting it faded. "Come on," Ethan said as he looked over Duran, slowly getting to his feet. "Time for a quick lesson in death, you son of a—" Duran came up quickly, lunging forward with his blade. Darius was right, Ethan thought. As good as Duran might have been with blasters and explosives, he hadn't taken the time to learn how to use a blade properly. Ethan decided to make the lesson short indeed. He gripped Duran's wrist again, twisting it to turn him. As soon as the Kirtsar's back was to Ethan, he snapped his arm quickly, dislocating the shoulder. Duran yelled, and Ethan used his free hand to cup Duran's chin, drawing his head back as his blade sank in right above the breastplate. He held it there. Duran was still shaking from the shock of the strike, and Ethan held him there for a few moments. Callista pushed to her feet, reaching down to pick up Sovereign's saber before looking to her left and tossing it to Marin, who caught it offhanded, without looking. She kept it in her hand as they moved together through the trees, stalking the few remaining Kirtsad. Callista could sense Ethan off to the west, but she let him be as they turned to track down the last few. "That was for Jarius," Ethan whispered, before he withdrew his blade and dropped the body to bleed out. He took a few moments to clean the blade before putting it back in its sheath and closing his eyes. And then he gathered his helmet. Vengeance was fulfilled. His friend could rest easier now. But there was still a job to be done, and he had more of this cur's comrades to hunt. Marin had stuffed Callista's ripper in the back of her belt, flipping the safety on as she did so. She brought Sovereign's saber up right-handed, the blue blade hissing to life, just in time to block a blaster bolt zipping towards her head. She ducked, the bolt glancing off her blade and angling back the way it had come. She couldn't hold a blaster in her left hand, but she could still do other things. Frowning slightly, she lifted her left hand and flicked her fingers, grinning somewhat as the hail of blaster bolts headed in her direction suddenly reversed themselves, and were followed shortly by a string of Mandoa curses. and the sound of a few falling bodies. After fitting his helmet back on, Ethan picked up his carbine and inserted a fresh power pack. Report. Meshla was the first to answer. We've cleared out the remaining Kurtzod, though I've no estimate on whether any remain inside the bunker. Callista's voice came in then. That force user of his is down. I'm pulling back with Marin to the Werda. Duran's been bled dry, Ethan said as he looked towards the bunker. Who's got concussion missiles or proton torpedoes? Meshla spoke up. I do. Want me to slag that place? And let the rest of us stand outside the blast radius to snipe anyone trying to leave. This ends now. Copy that. Give me 2 minutes. The comm went silent momentarily as she took off towards her ship. Her voice came back into the commnet as she slid into the pilot's chair. Coming in from the east, weapons hot. Duck and cover, Bode. Her words cut off as the roar of engines assaulted their ears. A few seconds later, her ship cut down through the trees, orienting towards the bunker. Twin plumes of smoke blossomed from the forward launchers as she stabbed the firing control, sending 2 concussion missiles racing for the bunker. A muffled boom could be heard as they impacted, followed by a roiling fireball soon after. Ethan kept a close eye on the entrances he'd seen, and was quite disappointed that there were no runners he could see. Huck, he said as he kept a watch. I was hoping for more of a fight than that. Callista chuckled a bit. I'm kind of glad there weren't more. I'm at the Werda now. Let's head home. I've got Marin resting in the spare quarters. Whatever Duran did messed her arm up pretty good. Do you have a needle? Ethan asked as he started to walk back towards the ship. Her confusion was evident even over the comm channel. What good will those do? His damn needles are what fire-ficked her arm in the first place. I might have a few spares in my medkit, though. Place one midway on the outside of her bicep, Ethan said, and another just below her collarbone. It'll pinch for a moment, and then it won't hurt. Give it a minute or two, her arm should return faster. Callista frowned, mulling that over for a moment, but then it made sense. The placement would stimulate the nerves in that area. Will do. There was a shuffling as she stood and rifled through her kit. Footsteps and muted conversation followed as she entered Marin's cabin. Even Ethan could hear Marin's hissed curse before Callista's voice came back. Needles are in place. Hi, Sarah! Minute for one in the collarbone, Ethan said as he entered the clearing where the ship was and began to unsling his carbine from his shoulder. Half for the one in her arm. Nodding to herself even though he couldn't see. Her gaze went to the timer in the corner of her HUD as she watched the seconds tick by slowly. After 30 seconds, she removed the one in Marin's arm, followed by the one in her collarbone 30 seconds later. How did that do? Ethan asked as he walked into the small cabin. Marin was sitting up now, carefully flexing her fingers. It's helping, but shasa, it feels like a million needles in my hand. It's still waking up, Ethan said. It's an old Katani method. It could be used for healing or torture. Figured he'd know one of the techniques. Turning, he started walking to the locker to put his weapons away. Okay, good night! Marin sighed, and then nodded. At least that Shakar is dead, she whispered, leaning back against the pillows. Exhaustion was written across her face. Callista turned to Ethan and raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you know that, Jessica? Ethan chuckled and looked back at the two of them before answering. How else? He said in a different tongue. It made both of them raise their eyebrows in surprise. Marin stared, her mouth falling open. You were told me you were raised Mandoad. How is it that you know Katani? Galvis, he told them. Katan's third colony from the home system. My folks were on a trade run shortly after I was old enough to travel. They got jumped, and the Mandoade found me afterward. Mandawad may be my life and my home, but inside, he tapped his chest once. This is still Katani. And with that, he turned and walked towards the cockpit. Marin's mouth hung open as she traded a stunned look with Callista. I didn't know. Callista shrugged. Neither did I. She stood and tucked a blanket around Marin before she went to the cockpit and strapped in. Aboard the Tresinia. Stefan? Al's voice over the intercom broke into Stefan's musing, and he looked up from the book he'd been reading into Tresinia's lounge area. Yes? I've got a comm signal coming in for you a moment ago. It's an old channel, but it's secured, so I'm sure it's someone who knows how to get in touch with you. I'll be right there, he said as he marked his place and set the book down. Jared was sleeping in one of the bunks while they were en route. Amber and Jared were engrossed in a serious game of Dejarik, and he smiled at the thought of the game as he walked towards the cockpit. Hal was alone at the controls. There wasn't any need for extra care yet, as they were still in friendly territory. He sat at the console on the left side, picked up a headset, and opened the channel. Hard here. Ooh, sorry. It's Vincent, he heard on the other end of the line. We've gotten some solid information on the mission you sent us on. Okay, can we talk about it here, or would a personal meeting be better? We have holo footage and other information that I'd rather not share over the waves, secure channel or not. I completely agree, Stefan said as he leaned back in the chair. Where are you now? On the edge of the Mercure system, fixing to leave as soon as we set a rendezvous. Here, Stefan mouthed to himself, wondering why their search had led to Talon, but he nodded at the thought that he had a good-sized piece of the puzzle. We're a few hours from our layover in the Elix system. I suggest meeting there, and we'll review what you have. We'll be there soon. And just like... Baton, the royal palace. Andrea leaned against the balcony outside their living quarters, where Edward approached and leaned on the railing beside her. Ian is still finishing up his schoolwork, and I was able to get Catelyn settled down for a nap, he said as they stood there watching the afternoon sky. Thank you, she said quietly. She closed her eyes. Marin's capture still weighs on your mind, doesn't it? She nodded softly. I know I gave up several abilities, and I don't regret any of it, but part of me feels I should have shared the responsibility of finding her, along with Ethan and Callista. They're both experienced fighters, Edward told her, and you've trained Marin as best as you can. Between your training and Ethan, she's got a lot of techniques to draw on, and I'm pretty sure that Ethan and Callista hadn't gone in there alone. You're right, Andrea said as she snuggled under his arm. Just musing, I suppose. I don't want to know how things went during your father's council session today. Edward grimaced at the comment. The intel wasn't good. We're still not getting any better cooperation from the Republic on anything. The Council has decided that we will have to use our full resources and stop relying on anything they give us on Imperial movements. You realize that that action could be exactly what the Empire wants? That was mentioned, yes, he said as he kept looking skyward. Until we get news from your father and the Dins, we're practically on our own. Us and the allies that have continued to support us. Coruscant, the safe house. Vernius didn't go out onto the balcony, but he stood near the window looking at the skyline. You have the sense of someone with a lot on your mind, he said as she approached. I was thinking about Irina, he said. I promised her I would get word to her mom to get off planet when I arrived. Commander Cadre would probably have already done that. But I still gave her my word. And I know you'd want to keep it. I'm sure she's already on her way, yes. And I'm guessing that was a task your father wanted to be done too. The young man nodded. She's concerned about whoever is behind this using her office and designs against everyone, yes. She's also concerned about our archives falling into the wrong hands. That's why he had me destroy the copies we had in the temple. Murray nodded. What about cover when we get ready to leave? I'm sure you didn't come alone. I didn't. Humir is hanging on the edge of the system, fully cloaked with 2 Marine assault teams standing by. That's good, she said as she looked at the chrono on the wall. He should be back soon. Aboard the Trasinia, Stefan sat and watched the holo footage that Nick and Vince had brought up above the Jadaric table. There was no mistake about the image of the person in the stasis pod. That's Einar, he said, to no one in particular, and then sighed heavily. What did you find on Barab 1, Vincent? He was using an old fallout shelter deep in a cave, Vince said, filling in the details. It looks like he left in a hurry, too. Data disks were scattered in the area, but they were all damaged. Wouldn't have been able to pull anything off of any of them. They're taking full precaution. The other night, Jared said as he pointed to the image. They were able to disarm him well enough, and none show signs of injury. He saw the need to construct a lightsaber in a hurry, Stefan said as he looked at the one hanging off the sentry's belt. It certainly has his style. Make one? Nick asked, completely missing what Stefan had caught on about. Why build one when he had one? His lightsaber is currently in the case in my study, Stefan said as he looked at each of them. Where was this footage Talon supplied taken from? He said, Bastion, Vince told them. Then the look on his face plain, and he thoroughly explained the dangers of trying to get to him. The place is like a fortress, according to the information. We may have to think about some alternative means of looking around, Hal said. Our cover of independent traders might not wash if they're going through as much scrutiny as I see here. It almost reminds me of the old days. I'm open to suggestions, Stefan said as he looked across at the table at each of them. Right. You know what? I think I can actually get to chapter 25. Alright. Gonna take a second. I'm gonna drink water. Right. Chapter 25. Catan, the Card residence. 2 days later. The slightly chilly breeze from the pass to Mount Adon ruffled Marin's hair as she stepped onto the landing pad from the warder's boarding ramp. So much seemed to have changed while she'd been away. The Card estate stood quiet. With Master Card gone, only Lady Card and Catherine stood off to the side, waiting for them. Marin heard Callista's armor's footsteps come down the ramp behind her, followed soon after by Ethan's heavier ones. After so long, she'd gotten to where she could tell them apart just by their footsteps. For a moment, she just stood there, wrapping her arms around her middle as she tried to ward off the chill. When Ethan's hand fell to her shoulder a moment later, she had to resist the urge to flinch. It was hard to forget what Joran had done to her. None of her training had prepared her for something like that. When she turned to look up at him, she caught the tense set of his shoulders. She could feel the tightly controlled anger, though it had ebbed some now with Joran's death. Marin started a bit when she felt a pat on her shoulder from Ethan before he turned back to the Berta to lock down the hatch. Though he wasn't force-sensitive, he understood what she was going through. In the next instant, she found herself folded into a hug by Lady Card. While Marin didn't know her that well, she viewed the Cards as a second set of parents, another family. Master Card and everyone in the Card family, and the students of the Praxium, had been a massive part of her life for the last several years. Her entire body went rigid for the briefest of moments before she took a breath, reaching to the Force for calm. Marin, I'm glad you're back safe, Lady Card said softly, next to her ear, hugging her gently but firmly. They stood like that for a moment before she seemed to sense that Marin was getting a bit uncomfortable. If you want, there's some behot in the kitchen. It's in the kettle in the stove. Marin nodded and murmured a quiet thank you in Katani as she slipped inside, Jade's gaze following her for a moment before she turned back to Callista and now Ethan, who had come back down to the landing pad. She's withdrawn, isn't she? Ethan and Callista traded a look before Callista spoke. She's very shaken. For a moment there was silence between the three of them. She blames herself for getting captured. I felt that very strongly. Aside from Duran's interrogating her, Callista felt Ethan twitch. When Duran's man captured her, he cut off her Padawan braid to get her to talk. Jade's eyes widened briefly as that fact sank in, and then she nodded. The faint lingerings of despair made sense now. And her arm? She looked to Ethan on that one. He grunted, seeming to shake himself free from his thoughts. That Jakar used an old Katani method that can either heal or cause pain. He used it to extract information from her. What information he got, I don't know. Nor does it matter now. He's dead. Slowly, he reached up and pulled off his helmet, revealing close-cropped short hair that was slightly tousled. His fingers curled tightly around the lower edge as he tried to contain his anger. Forgive the language, my lady. Jade nodded. It's all right. If it were one of my children or Stefan, I would feel the same way. She gazed off into the forest for a moment. Come inside. There's behot and calf on the stove, and I'm sure you could use some downtime after the last few days. She led them into the house, knowing by now that they would dust off before following. The trio followed the scent of brewing calf and behot to the kitchen, where they found Marin staring into her mug at the end of the table. Callista shared a look with Jade as she poured herself a cup of behot before making her way to the chair to Marin's right and sliding into it. She hesitated, and then gently hugged Marin, holding her mug in her free hand. As she opened her mouth to ask Marin if she should call for Andrea, Callista felt her sister's familiar presence, and Marin did as well. Callista felt the younger girl relax ever so slightly. She smiled. "Decoy, Andrea." She grinned slightly at Andrea's look, but then sobered as she reached out to Andrea in the force. She's alright physically, except for a couple of injuries, but she's still feeling a bit of guilt and despair. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 40 seconds. Andrea nodded, hugging her mother before grabbing herself a cup of calf and sliding in on Marin's left. Ethan had already claimed a chair at the end of the table, reminding himself not to prop his feet. Andrea sipped at her calf before she leaned in and gently took Marin's left hand, holding it firmly. A long moment of silence stretched between them. She knew Marin would talk when she was ready. After several moments, Marin began to speak, quietly. I'd been scouting Snagus 5 for a couple of days before I came across signs of someone else within a few kilometers of the house. Too close for my liking. I knew it wasn't any of the colonists. They keep to the southern regions. She paused and slowly slipped her behot. I finally found his trail, but I got careless, and his snare caught me. Her left hand clenched weakly around Andrea's momentarily as she bit her lip. She set down her mug, her right hand slipping inside her fatigues to clutch Darius's tags. And she was glad they were still there. She'd thought for sure that they'd been taken. It was a moment before she continued, her gaze still on the table. He kept asking me if I was alone and who I was. He eventually got the answer to both. She sighed. I guess he'd seen or heard of the DE-10s that Buir gave me, and figured out who I was from there. He kept asking if I was alone and didn't like my lack of an answer. Finally, he took a knife he'd been keeping in the fire and sliced off my braid. She broke off and looked away. Shamed. Andrea nodded and hugged her lightly. You've nothing to be ashamed of. He was the one. Marin shook her head. Naish. When Duran began interrogating me, he used needles. He either numbed for a long time or hurt a lot. She shuddered a bit at the memory. I don't understand why he asked me what he did. But he asked me what we were learning, how many students were at the Praxium, and how many had been knighted. She frowned. He also wanted to know about the strength of the Katani Navy, but I don't know anything beyond basic information there.
We are greatly honored by your visit, ambassadors.
Thank you
Make
for the
yourselves
follow.
comfortable. My master will be with you shortly.
Nope. Nope. Don't need random people adding me on Discord. Okay. Alright. At that, the four adults looked at each other. What could Joran or whoever had hired him want with that information? Callista frowned and looked at Andrea. What possible use could he have for information on the Praxium? Military intel I can see, but the Praxium? Andrea sighed. I don't understand it either. If Daddy were here, he could figure it out, but he's off on a mission right now. She looked at the wall, Chrono. It's late. We should all get some rest, and we can talk more in the morning. She hugged Marin close and helped her to her feet. We have an ad starting in 34 seconds. So I'm gonna read like a paragraph and then stop. Kaldabe, Mandalore. The transit back to Mandayam had been relatively uneventful. Something Meshla was glad for after Bastine 4. With Joran dead, most of the Karatsad had withdrawn to regroup. She'd put out scouts to their usual haunt, but there were no leads. That fact alone concerned her. The Jagalar had put into orbit over Mandayam only an hour before. Leaving a skeleton crew for now, she released the rest to personal leave and had taken a shuttle to the surface. We have an ad starting. I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna take a break and get some water. I will see you guys in a minute and a half. There we go. I hit the wrong button over there. I'm bad. Okay. Gotta pay attention to what button I'm hitting on the stream deck. Oh, craziness, tell you. Alright. While the mission had succeeded, the disappearance of the remaining members of Kirtsod was not something to be ignored. The gentle bump of the shuttle contacting the tarmac jolted her from her thoughts. Shaking herself, Meshla rose, tucking her Boise under her arm as she strode off the shuttle and across the tarmac. She knew the way. She didn't need anyone to show her to Mandalore's office. It took her several minutes to travel across the city on foot. The signs of the recent battle were still quite evident, but she also saw signs of efforts to rebuild and repair. If one thing could be said for the Mandalorian people, it was this. They were a culture that didn't give up easily. If one studied the history of the Mandalorians, one would see evidence of this time and again. As she drew near Mandalore's office, she heard voices inside. One she recognized right away, but the other she didn't. A frown crossed her face as she approached the door and raised her hand to knock before she saw it was already open. Mandalore Marut stood in front of his desk, speaking with another she didn't recognize. Her hand dropped to her verpine in pure reflex, but she didn't draw. The stranger wore Beskar gap, common enough sight on Mandayam these days, but something about him set her on edge. She studied the scene momentarily before stepping into the office and clearing her throat, her thumbs hooked casually into her weapons belt. Mandalore, when you have a moment, I need to speak with you. The one she'd addressed turned, a slight smile touching the older man's face. Parjai Marut had been Mandalore for nearly a decade, and it showed on his face. Leading a culture of warriors was a challenging task, especially when those who chose to call themselves Kirtsod took it upon themselves to destroy those who fought for the greater cause. While it was true that Mandalorians and the Detize had been at odds for centuries, and that was putting it gently, they'd had to work together to bring down Kirtsod. Mandalorian scouts had been an invaluable help when the Detize needed a different set of eyes on a situation. It had been especially valuable when reports of Kirtsod operating in Katani space had surfaced. The Katani may have good relations with the Jedi Order, but this called for a different approach. One that required people used to dealing with such matters. And that was where Meshla and her crew came in. With help from Sharon and getting in touch with the right people, Mandalore received clearance to send a contingent into the Galan system, and send Meshla and her people through Katani space on their way to Bastine 4. It had shaved at least a day off their transit. But what mattered now was the result of her mission, and she didn't want to share that in front of some Arueti. Mandawad he might be, but she didn't know him and thus didn't trust him. One couldn't be too careful, especially these days. She waited a few moments as Parjai spoke to the other men. After a few more words, he turned and left. Finally, Mandalore turned to her, his face serious momentarily. Meshla, it's good to see you again. He smiled, which was good to see at such times. Oh my goodness. Glitch! What? Oh, that wasn't you. Scared me. This is what happens when I add things to sound alerts. Hi. I should probably add more to sound alerts. I'll get there. I had a feeling somebody was gonna play with that. It got my attention. Hey, I was never that bad. Come on. By the way, it's good to see you. Hi, Glitch. How are you? How was class? Also, I know. I deserve a little bit of paint back, I suppose. I'm just finishing reading this chapter. I might actually get done by 9. Shocker. Might read a little bit more, we'll see. Well, I might read another chapter. We'll see how I'm feeling. Oh, I was only gonna read 3 chapters today. But we're currently into the 4th one, so we'll see. We'll see how I'm feeling. You're fine. You're fine. I needed somebody to get my attention anyway. Okay. I really should add more to that though. I'm trying to find Star Wars themed ones so that people can play with that. Ah. Yes, I actually wrote my namesake into one of my stories. You're welcome. Lord, hello, sir. Yay! Have a mod in the house. Awesome. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. I am currently reading. And we're almost 4 full chapters in. Alright. Here we go. She nodded, all business as she shifted her helmet to her left hand, thumping her chest momentarily in the formal salute before she smiled and sat down. Nisita. Habit. He chuckled. I trust your mission went well? I got your coded message a few hours ago. I'm glad to know the young Durza got home safe. Much thanks to you. She tried to wave him off. Just part of the job, sir. But it's the least we can do for Ethan and Jarius. Amanda rest his soul. They were both silent for a moment before she spoke again. There were perhaps 3 dozen Kirtsod operatives on Bestine. They dug into an old base. Looked like a remnant from the last Galactic Civil War. It was well hidden. I met with Ethan and Master Jassarin, I think her name was. Married to Canadius, if I recall. Rajai nodded again, offering her a mug of bee-hot before motioning for her to continue. She sighed. I don't know what happened to the young Durza, but she was favoring her left arm when Ethan and Callista recovered her. I think they're back at Katan by now. A faint frown crossed her face. Mandalore, I'm concerned. The Kirtsod are much bolder these days. Granted, that was due partially to Joran. I saw Ethan take him down. He deserved to exact vengeance for Jarius. But what of the remaining Kirtsod? I know there are still pockets here and there, but they aren't in their usual places. She rubbed her forehead. I'll keep looking, of course. But we must be diligent. Coruscant sky lanes. It was the lack of motion that actually woke him. The soothing rumble of the engine, the clean whistle of air, and the background noise of flight had vanished along with the vibrating feeling of motion. He didn't know where, but he knew they'd arrived. Micron opened his eyes to see a pretty redhead in a medevac uniform hovering over him. The top 2 buttons of her coveralls were undone, and her ample cleavage nearly smothered him as she leaned over to undo the clasp holding his gurney in place aboard the medical transport. Do you charge extra for the bedside service? The rogue managed to grin through the pain. She startled and looked down at him with icy blue eyes and a mixture of faux anger and amusement. You didn't know it was me at first, Ari said, shaking her now red hair. And you were flirting? I didn't know where I was, the rogue shrugged and then grimaced. The act of moving caused the burns on his back to stretch and tear. He floated atop several back-to bandages that kept the burns from worsening, but they did nothing for the pain. It's a good way to catch a person off guard in case I needed to escape. Uh-huh. Ari rolled her eyes as she rolled the rogue back onto his stomach to take the pressure off his back. Sure. honest, Migron protested, turning his head to see Ari's waist and the side door to the medical beyond her. Another set of legs came into view, also in medevac attire. Where are we, anyway? And what's with the uniforms? We're heading into the temple, Master Din. Reneus' voice was above him, the new set of legs belonging to him. The uniforms and the transport were acquired by some of Phoenix Squadron. With your recent attack and the general tension on Coruscant, Master Ari felt it would be best if we traveled incognito. Hi, Reneus. Migron coughed weakly. Hello, Master, Reneus said. Mick could almost hear the kid's grin. Now you stop talking, Ari chided. Your lungs need to focus on breathing. We're gonna drop you in a back-to-tank for a day while we plan our exit. And track down what we can on your attackers. Another male voice entered the confined space of the medevac transport. There was a hiss as the rear doors opened and the sunlight streamed in. Soon, Mick was hovering along the Permacrete promenade on his gurney with 4 sets of footsteps echoing around him. It's Bayir Tuhi, the voice continued, and that heavy set of footfalls is Hart Baka. Phoenix Squadron Aces at your service. Mick grunted a quick greeting and watched as the Permacrete gave way to the granite tiling as they crossed the threshold into the temple. The cool, recirculated air inside set his back to stinging, and he bit down on his pillow to keep from groaning. There's no need to be brave, Master Din, Reneus said. There's almost nobody here to hear you scream. The temple's been mostly evacuated. All that remains is the equipment and a few techs closing down the records room to ensure all our data is safely erased. Besides, anyone looking at your back wouldn't dream of begrudging you a moment of pain. Yeah, sir, the other voice, Hart, spoke up. It looks like Master Card tried to roast you on his open grill. Migron did moan at the thought of his seared flesh. That would be a lovely scar to add to his collection. Oh, stop being so vain, Ari sighed as they rounded a corner and pushed into the medical wing. The gurney stopped next to a bubbling and ready back-to-tank. I'm putting you in a healing trance while you're in here. Yeah, it's gonna scar, but when will you ever be staring at your own back? Mick let out a defeated sigh. Such a whiner, Ari laughed. Now you 3, help me get him up. We need to strip him down and get him in the tank, then we'll get some food and review the evidence and our exit strategy. Mick groaned mournfully. Yes, Nerf Herder, Ari smiled. We'll save you some food for when you're out. Now, she looked to the other 3. On 3, we lift. 1, 2, 3! Alright. You know what? Yeah, I think I could read another chapter. Oop. Back into my mic. Only just now 9 o'clock. So, I can read another chapter if you guys are feeling up to it. What do you think? You guys up for another chapter? I definitely am. Hey, Tin Man, welcome in. Right, I'm gonna get another drink of water and then I will get to reading. So we started our evening with chapter 22, and I was only gonna read 3 chapters, but they ended up kind of short, so I'm gonna go a little bit longer. Also, for anybody who hasn't seen this, my cool little sweatshirt with my current logo. I'm working with an artist, Halsey Inks, who was actually here in chat earlier. She's been helping me with a new logo and some new artwork and screens for the channel. So hopefully we'll have those before too long. And hopefully by that point I'll have some merch on my not their own fourth wall. Yeah, I'm a pro streamer. Hopefully soon I will have some merch on my fourth wall. Right now, I do have a couple of things with the current logo, but the store isn't active at the moment. So if you guys would like to check that out, you can check out the panels below the stream. Want to go take a look? All right. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna get a stretch in before we start. I do a lot of sitting at work, so I forget to stretch sometimes. So it's always good to have that reminder. I'm gonna fix my camera over here. Alright. Alright. Chapter 26. Bastion. The middle of nowhere. This isn't going to work. Have faith. It'll work. I do have faith. I have faith that we're going to be shot at very soon. We're nearing the gate. Everyone check your gear. This isn't going to be pretty. The four of them rummaged through the tool belts around their waists, checking the gear they'd stowed in each. They wore mechanics' coveralls, had ident badges, and they all wore a look of hurried dishevelment. It was just past 0200 local, and they were heading towards a nondescript gate in the middle of nowhere, off a gravel road with signposts every 20 meters warning that unauthorized vehicles would be met with extreme force. Luckily, their vehicle was meant to be here. It was a large, box-shaped transport that rumbled softly over the terrain at a pace just faster than a broken-down tug. It was uniformly brown, with the exception of the white lettering on the sides that read simply, Mechanics. Stefan rechecked the cylindrical tube of engine grease in his tool belt, felt the weight of it in his hand and the object hidden within with the force. His lightsaber had fit snugly into the tube. He pushed it back into his borrowed utility belt and looked to the others. Hal, Jared, and Vincent stood with him in the personnel portion of the transport, Nick, being the team member that most closely resembled his stolen identification badge, was driving. The quintet of Imperial mechanics that Stefan and his team had replaced were sleeping peacefully in an abandoned barn about 10 kilometers away. Vincent hunkered down and closed his eyes, radiating nothing but calm. Not much could excite the mercenary. Whether the insertion ran smoothly or their cover was blown and it would be an all-out fight, not much could ruffle the war-hardened veteran. Amber had been left behind with their ship. Hal and Jared had just a little more field experience, and the mechanics team they'd targeted was all male anyway. Aside from that, her upbringing in the Hapes Consortium gave her that certain quality that made bribing Starport bureaucrats that much easier. Hal was nervous, though, and Stefan could sense it through the force and see it in their eyes. "Steady, boys," he whispered, and he added some reassuring strength through the force. "Lock it down tight. Pull yourselves in, and shut down your presence in the force. We need to be calm, collected. We do this every day. We're mechanics. This is our job." They were nearing the gatehouse. Stefan could feel the transport slow to a stop. He suited action to words and completely shut himself down in the force. It wouldn't do for the gate guard to be force-sensitive and pick up on the quintet of force-using mechanics in the transport. Hal and Jared visibly calmed. They'd do. "Late-night repairs?" The voice was muffled, but they could hear the gate guard conversing with Nick in the driver's seat. "You look like you just woke up." "Yeah," they heard Nick reply. "Blasted heat's gone out on the lower levels again, and if they're going to go 4 hours without it. Oh no, call in the night shift again. They've got 2 full hours of sleep. They ought to be fine." "Hey," the gate guard replied, "it could be worse. You could be stuck in a 4x4 shack in the middle of nowhere with nothing to keep you company except your thoughts and the random security update." "Touché, buddy," Nick said. "Touché. This is taking too long." Vince whispered, his hand sliding into his tool belt. He's stalling. Give it a second, Stefan whispered, shaking his head. There was a pause that stretched into infinity. The tension rose within the transport, and Vincent seemed to be vibrating in anticipation. Then the engine revved up, and they were on their way. Hal and Jared visibly sighed with relief. Don't count your blessings just yet, Vincent warned. We've got our work cut out for us now. The two nodded in reply. Stefan produced a stolen datapad, and the four went over the layout and the plan once more. They'd be entering through a service gate into the hidden bunker. Their maintenance plan had them taking the freight lift down to the 40th floor below the surface, just above what they hoped was a high-security prisoner containment on the 41st. The entire floor was coded restricted on their stolen datapad, and the layout had been blanked. On top of that, Stefan could sense a strange waxing and waning of force energy combined with extreme pain emanating from that level of the complex. He didn't know what they were doing down there, but the thought of Einar being dragged through it made his stomach tighten. This plan was nigh suicidal, he knew, but it was necessary. They'd be killing many birds with one stone. They'd found Einar. They'd located a secret Imperial facility where they were holding at least one Force user prisoner. They'd be gathering information as they went about the rescue mission, and they probably wouldn't get another chance. Silently, he said a prayer to the lady. Above all else, he just hoped they'd all make it back alive. We have an ad starting in 4 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay. Bastion. The secret Imperial complex. Riff off! Dan growled at his captor and oppressor. Or unshackle me and meet your end! He was strapped to a vertical table, cables and diodes attached to his head and running to a bank of pulsating machines behind him. He was underground, far underground, and he was on Bastion. What they were doing, he didn't know, but he'd found them. The Sith and the Empire were working together again, it seemed, and they were up to something terrible. The wounds in the Force seemed to be fewer in this region of space, but deeper. He could feel the machine somehow drawing on his own connection with the Force, feeding on his strength, draining his energy. He didn't know how, but he knew that they were behind it all. He couldn't even begin to guess their purpose, though. He stared daggers at the Sith Lord pacing before him. Such anger, the Dark One said, his voice calm and deep. Such arrogance. Do you really think you could injure me in your weakened state? Yours would be a short attack followed by an even quicker death. But we have better uses for you. Like I said, Zan bit out between surges of pain. The machine seemed to draw on him in waves. Let me down and find out. Oh, you're so very boring, Sith lamented. Let's see if we can elicit a different tune, shall we? Zan had been expecting this, and he readied himself. He could feel the machine warming up to draw on him again, and the Sith raised his right hand. Lightning leaped from the Sith's fingertips and connected with Zan's bare chest. He channeled the energy through himself and into the machine. Behind him, sparks ignited, and recognition filled the Sith's eyes. He cut off his attack, but it was already too late. The machinery overloaded from the surge, and the monitor bank surrounding the table to which Zan was strapped exploded outward in a shower of electricity and glass. Zan's shackles slackened as the power in the room dipped, and he used the moment to slip free of his restraints. He dropped to the floor and tore the electrodes from his head. The Sith had just recovered, hatred and anger burning in his eyes. Zan didn't give him a chance to attack. He lunged at the Sith and slammed his bulk into the far wall. More monitors shattered as the Sith's head bounced off the view screen. Zan managed to wrap his arms around the Sith's ribs, muscles tightening. He squeezed. The Sith pounded on Zan's back with his fists, raining hammer blows down between his shoulder blades, but Zan only drew on the force and squeezed harder. There was a loud crack, and the Sith gasped for air once before blood spilled out his mouth and he began to gurgle and choke. Fear replaced the anger in his eyes as Zan dropped his limp body to the floor. Grasping at Zan's legs, the Sith died, choking on his own blood. Zan knew he didn't have much time. By the time he'd grabbed the lightsaber off the Sith's belt, the alarm klaxons were already splitting the air with their high-pitched wail. Hastily, he fished the keycard from around the broken Sith's neck and went for the door. It hissed open upon his approach. The hallway outside was lit with strobing red lights, but the footsteps he heard and the presences he felt in the Force were all heading away from his position. Having learned long ago to never question an opportunity, Zan broke into a run down the hall. From what he could remember of the layout as he was dragged to the experiment chamber, he was heading in the direction of the holding cells and the security room. With luck, he could take out the security guards and retrieve his gear from the storage lockers they'd placed it in. There was a data disk hidden within his helmet that had all the information he'd gathered thus far. And then he'd rescue Anar. He'd seen the old Jedi in a stasis chamber near the holding cells. He'd no idea what the Sith were doing with him in stasis, but he wasn't about to leave him there. Hey, Shadow Legion! Yes! I am reading my fanfictions tonight. I am indeed. We have an ad starting in 5 seconds. They are a minute and a half long. It's a great time to go get a drink of water, grab a snack, have a stretch, and I'm gonna do just that, so I will see you in a minute and a half. Alright, and we are back from our ad. Thanks so much for hanging out during that. I appreciate you. Alright. Give myself a little bit of a stretch. Alright. Zane rounded the corner. Just ahead was the door to the security station. Through the window, he could see 2 guards staring intently at the forward monitor, luckily in the exact opposite direction. He crept forward slowly, keeping low along the corridor. He stretched his senses and noticed the guards were not force sensitive. He stopped below the counter window and grinned. Stretching out in the force, he grabbed the two guards and sent them sailing through the window and into the opposite wall with enough force to shatter their necks. Their bodies fell crumpled to the floor, and he rummaged their pockets until he found the security key. Quickly, he waved the key in front of the sensor on the security station door and was pleased when it whisked open before him. His hand rushed to the storage lockers and quickly found his gear. He hurriedly pulled on his armor and checked his weapons. Smiling, he slipped on the helmet and beamed at the rush of information pouring over his HUD. Now for some final information gathering while the base is in relative chaos. He moved to the monitor banks and clipped a data feed into the main computer. Thanks to a decrypt routine uploaded by Sharon before he left on the mission, all Zan had to do was select Download All on his armor's internal computer to start siphoning off anything and everything of any import from the base's main computer. Instantly, myriad new and exciting klaxons and lights erupted to join the general din, and a loading bar floated into view at the bottom right of his HUD. While the download progressed, Zan pulled up prisoner files and noticed nearly every prisoner was force-sensitive of one kind or another. He made note of Einar's cell and another note that they'd apparently released him from stasis. He was scheduled for experimentation the following day. Not if I can help him, Zan thought. He checked the progress bar for the download again and silently urged it to move faster. His HUD pinged with a new heat signature heading his way. He checked the progress bar again. 75%. His internal computer pulled up the map of the floor and placed 5 red dots in the approximate location on the map. Steadily, they moved closer and closer, surrounding the corner and coming into full view of the forward window. Zan gripped his lightsaber in his right hand and a ripper in his left, and ducked down behind the computer station, preparing to leap. Almost simultaneously, his HUD pinged with a download complete message, and 2 Sith warriors with 3 base guards rounded the corner. They paused when they saw a fully armored Mandalorian through the security station window. Hunched as he was, his HUD automatically started pulling targeting data on the 5 enemies down the hall. Grinning, Zan launched the small-grade concussion missile loaded into his jetpack. The rocket shattered the glass and screamed down the hall in a matter of seconds. The Sith warriors raised their hands to deflect. The range-to-target sensor had them beat. The missile exploded, turning the air in the general vicinity to fire and vaporizing all 5 enemies where they stood. The corridor walls buckled and blackened, but the vents soon kicked in and cleared the smoke. Zan vaulted through the window and started off towards the prisoner cells and Einar's dot on his HUD map. Here's where the fun starts. Nick grinned as he shed his stolen mechanics coveralls and checked his blasters and lightsaber. They all wore their own clothes and combat gear under their stolen uniforms for just this occasion, and they all stripped off the useless things as quickly as they could. On the brighter side of things, they'd made it to the security level where they knew Einar was being held. On the downside, nobody had a map. The alarms tripped the second they exited the lift, and they could all sense dozens of armed guards and Sith closing on their position fast. Stefan, Nick, and Vince formed a wide semicircle in the front of the lift doors, while Jared and Hal held close to the doors. The lift opened onto a 3-way intersection. There was a corridor heading straight ahead, but blast doors had slammed shut about 20 meters down the hall when the lift doors let the would-be rescuers off. The corridors to either side ended in corners about 30 meters from their position. Stefan stretched his senses. The bulk of the force seemed to be coming from the left-hand passage. The forward passage's blast doors served the rescuers well enough by eliminating another possible attack vector. Vince! Nick! Eyes left, Stefan ordered, suiting action to words by moving to a point position facing the left side hallway. Nick and Vince fell in behind and to the right and left of him. Jared, Hal, watch our rear, but keep an eye on the blast doors as well. Call out with any contact. The 2 young men took up guard positions to their rear, Jared with his saber ready, and Hal his blaster. Oh, of course! Mine definitely don't have any canon characters. That's the whole point of fanfiction. Nothing says you have to keep to canon at all. Stefan could feel a good-sized group nearing the corner. Within seconds they'd round it, and the fight would be on. He rolled his shoulders once and began to calm his mind and fall into the flow of the force. He could feel the energy dance around him as he began to let go, as Mick would say. His silver blade rested easily in his hand, and despite the onslaught rushing toward them, he felt nothing but peace. To either side, and slightly behind him, he could feel Nick and Vince doing the same. Nick had the feel of cool, collected confidence belying his usual jovial and unserious manner. As the pirate fell deeper, the force seemed to rush through him. His golden blade hummed in his hands. Vincent was a dam waiting to burst. The force rushed into him and trickled through in snake-like tendrils. He waited only to be released. His crimson blade cast his pale skin in a blood-red hue and shone within his eyes. In an instant, their enemy appeared before them, rushing down the corridor to meet them. There were 4 Sith with a group of 12 Imperial stormtroopers. The same thought passed through Stefan, Nick, and Vince in a heartbeat, and in unison each outstretched a hand, calmed their attackers. Simultaneously, they let down the dam each had been holding back. The force rushed through them in a torrent greater than the highest waves on Camino. A veritable wall of pure first energy erupted down the hall, buckling the walls. It slammed into their opponents like a garbage scow propelled by a Star Destroyer's engines. The force of the impact was enough to shatter bones of the front 6 stormtroopers. The rest went sailing into the far wall. Some of them died instantly when their necks snapped on impact. Others were not so lucky. Broken ribs, punctured lungs, shattered spines, paralyzing all nerve function. 2 of the Sith managed to soften their landings and escape with mere bruising. The other 2 suffered the same fate as the troopers they led. I actually tend to write using Google Drive, Google Docs, and I will publish on fanfiction or Archive our own. Sith, Stefan said quietly as he looked over the 2 that had died with the troopers. He had gone over the security footage several times on the way to Bastion with Jared and Vince. There had been something about the way those men had walked when they were escorting Einar's frozen form. It had made him suspect, and the proof was now in front of him. The warrior on the floor in front of him was one he had seen before on the battlefield of Mist. Stefan closed the man's eyes while Nick and Vince quickly dispatched the other 2 and rejoined him along with Jared and Hal. You had said a few years back that some had survived, Vincent said as he looked around. If he was here, then there have to be others here as well. Gives us some explanation on who is behind these force wounds. I can sense several of them here. Deep ones. Something I don't get, Nick said, while Jared and Hal started to look down the corridors for additional incoming. The alarms went off just as we got here. This is a lot for just a first response. Not knowing what set the alarms off in the first place. We didn't set them off, Stefan told them as he closed his eyes and opened himself up farther. Further down the corridor, he could feel it, like a magnesium flare amongst all the cold. There's been an escape, and he's causing worse havoc than we are. He's having all the fun, Nick chided in. I say we meet up with him. We need to, Stefan told them with a bit of surprise. It's Zan. How in the force did he end up here is a question for later. He reignited his blue silver blade and started down the corridor. Chances are he might know where Einar is being held. Let's go. CSS Valkyrie. You asked for me to come up, Admiral, West said as he walked up to Payne's command chair on the bridge. Is the fleet being ready for hostile recon work? Mather asked as he handed him a datapad. Third Fleet is back up to full strength. We're going to start doing our own probe once we're linked up in the Aline system. Who's going to cover the area that Third Group was going to patrol once they left the dock at Catane? Wes asked as he read over the tasking order and the course of systems that they would be going through. And it was good. A decent sized list of objectives. We received word that those behind what had happened on Galan have been dealt with. I didn't get the details, but 7th has been released from the constant patrol they've been holding over the system. I'll start getting my flight crews ready. Wes. Sir? The CAG asked as he looked back towards Payne. This came directly from the top, Payne started. The Imperials cross our paths while we're still outside the recognized border for the Remnant. We don't hesitate to open fire. Aye, sir, Wes answered as he informally saluted. I'm sure Elia and Cam were glad to hear that news. So will my bunch. Bastion, the Imperial complex. You realize, Jared said as he cut through another trooper from the bunch that had recently appeared as they made their way down the corridors, that at some point whoever's in charge is going to call in every trooper on the planet. It was the third group so far, and this one didn't have the short-lived advantage of having Sith with them as some of the others had. Between the 4 Jedi and former intelligence operatives, they had been making short work of the complex's security contingent. Considering that the Jedi were battle-hardened and well-seasoned, it was an unfair advantage. If they're not any better than this, Nick answered as he parried several blaster shots back the direction they had come, I'd say bring them on. I could keep this up all day. They may not all know about this place, Stefan said as he finished taking down the last guard and looked around to see they were clear for the moment. I'm sensing that there is more Sith here than Imperial personnel. He closed his eyes and focused himself. He stretched out with his senses. There was disarray, no doubt, between what felt like Zan breaking out of whatever situation he was in, combined with the arrival of Stefan and the others. The Sith that were here were caught off guard. So far, the initiative lay with them and Zan, but it was inevitable that given time, their host would soon organize them. He should be just down this corridor, he told the rest, pointing down a junction with his lightsaber. We need to meet up quick while the element of surprise is still working for him. And that is the end of chapter 26. I think that I'm going to stop there for this evening. I know, chapter 26. Crazy! Trying to find my marker so I can make note of where we stopped. Chapter 20. Got through chapter 26. So, alright. I have a little marker board down here in front of me so I can actually track. Because honestly, I have a hard time keeping track. But to answer your question, Shadow Legion, I generally will write using Google Docs. When I originally started writing 25 years ago, I was writing cooperatively, so we were actually doing play-by-post on forums, but that's been ages ago. So now it's just me, and I work on the chapters and stuff in Google Drive, Google Docs, and for all of the other stories that are kind of part of our little universe, I maintain them, kind of keep them up to date. So they're all on Archive of Our Own to be read at any point if you would like, so please feel free. And if you'd like to catch up on the story that we're currently reading, it is Age of Darkness, and we just finished reading chapter 26. So, my next stream, give me 1 second here while I take a look. Oh my goodness. So my next stream is going to be Oh wait, hold on. So my next stream is going to be the 16th, which is a week from today. And that is going to be SWTOR currently. That may change. I have been trying to work in other games. So currently the schedule says SWTOR. So, that's the plan for the moment. Thank you to everyone who came by this evening. I appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed the story so far. And if you'd like to catch up, you can do so by clicking on the link that's a little bit further up in the chat. I'm going to see if we have anybody that we can go say hello to. Give me just a second while I take a look. You know what? All right. I would greatly appreciate if all of you guys could tag along for this raid and say hi to my friend Ogle. He's a fellow streamer, a recent Twitch affiliate, and an all-around chill dude. He is currently playing Schedule 1, which I am not familiar with, but it looks interesting. Exactly sure what the game is about. Well, let's go find out. This first raid command is for anybody who is subscribed to the channel, because it has subscriber-only emotes. So if you are subscribed to the channel, please feel free to grab that raid command. And if you are following the channel or simply here to watch and listen, you can grab this raid message. I hope you all enjoyed the story this evening. And I hope to see you all at my next stream a week from tonight. And if you'd like to come back and join me for story time, I will be reading again in 2 weeks. And I also will be doing a writing workshop stream. Let me take a look again. Oh my goodness. My next writing workshop stream is going to be Sunday, April 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And my next stream, which is a week from this evening, is going to be SWTOR at 7 p.m. Eastern. Okay. So let's take care of this. Again, thank you so very much for joining me this evening. I appreciate each of you. Give me just a minute. So Archive of Our Own, if you want to join the website, you have to get an invite, and I'm not sure if they're actually doing those right now, but you can. No, it's okay. That's okay. That's actually a great question. Like I said, Archive of Our Own, if you want to host or make an account, you have to get an invite. Last I knew they had a waiting list. You can read anything on the website without an account, as long as the story is not locked, so that you have to log in and read it. Mine should not be locked. I think I unlocked them so you can read them. Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Please let me know what you think. I actually started writing in high school. I started writing cooperatively back when I was about 17 or so. And in the last 5 or 10 years, it's just been me kind of maintaining the stories and continuing the particular arc for my main character. I'm not sure what you mean. So when we originally wrote these stories, they were kind of they weren't really chapters in the normal sense. I had to break them up into chapters to make them like a readable length. Depending on the length of a chapter, it can take me 30 minutes to an hour when I'm reading audibly. Hey there, Sniper, I'm actually getting ready to raid out. Oh, so if you click on chapter 1, once you get to the bottom, you can click on next chapter. And it'll just take you to the next one. Not a problem at all. Yep. It's kind of like turning the page in a book. Or reading, you know, a book on, not Audible, but, like, I guess on Kindle, kind of. I guess it kind of works the same way. So down at the bottom of the chapter, and I think at the top, there's some controls to get to the next chapter. Some very good questions. I appreciate them. Please let me know if you have any more. I will be around on the 20th for a writing workshop, and that's a great place to ask questions, but you can also ask questions at any time. I appreciate you. And I appreciate each and every one of you for being here this evening. It is greatly appreciated. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your week. Let's go say hi to Ogle, okay? Just 1 second while I get this raid going. Oop, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. There we go. Alright. I have my own raid message. I really do hope that you guys enjoyed the story tonight. It's actually been really, really cool for me to kind of revisit these stories after so long. Like I said, I've been writing for 25 years, but when I started streaming a year ago, I never realized that we would get to this point in the stories. So it's pretty awesome. Really excited that we've gotten to this point with the stories, and there's still more to go. So, hope you guys will stick around for the ride. Let's go say hi to Ogle. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and I hope you have a great week.